Hello everyone, my name is Note Colt, but you can just call me Diego, and this is the 30655 Forklift with Pallet. This is the current Polybag for 2023, and it is redeemable for 500 VIP points through LEGO's VIP Rewards program. But I think it's also available as a freebie with some certain LEGO or Technic related magazines. I'm not too sure, but yeah. Actually, this set, I believe, is a rehash of the 8290 mini forklift that came in yellow. That was from 2007. That one had 88 pieces, and I think it was a standalone set at the time. So it's nice to see that they are bringing it back. So again, this is the box, or rather, this is the bag, because it's a poly bag. There's nothing much really to say other than yeah, it's a forklift. You can see the forklift and it's in red and it has a little pallet accessory. Opening up the instructions that are included, we can see here that, well, comparing it to 2022's Polybag, it is much more dense. There are a lot more instructions. Last year, there were even ads for some of the Monster Jam sets that came out that year. Here, there are no ads whatsoever. It's just all instruction. So that's pretty exciting. So the set comes with 78 pieces. This set's color scheme is now red instead of the yellow that we've seen twice before on the channel. So that's nice. We finally have a change of pace. So as you can see from the pieces here, there are a lot of very tiny little small pieces. Yeah, that's a thing that I'll get more into later on. So right now I just want to go over some of the highlights of the pieces. First up, we have this sort of curved half beam type piece, and then we have these very tiny half beams that are only 2 studs wide. They both feature 2 cross axle connections, and there are a bunch of these in the bag. I think there are 12 in total. Next up, we have this translucent orange cone, and then we have some tan bricks, some system pieces that will serve as the accessory, the pallet for the forklift. And then we have a bunch of these little cross axles with stoppers in them. There are quite a few of them that come in different lengths, and as you can see here, these brown ones, they come in the same color but they have different lengths. One of them is 3 modules wide and the other one is 5 modules wide. It may be easy to get these confused while building. I know I did the first time I built this forklift. So just gotta be aware about that. So those are the piece highlights for me. Let's just get straight into the build. So comparing this build to last year's Polybag, I would say it's a much more interesting and complex experience. As I said before, there were a lot more tiny pieces, a lot of axles, a lot of 2 length wide axles, 3 length, 4 length, 5 length, some of them with stoppers, some of them without. And there were a couple of these tiny little half beam pieces. And if you look at the instruction sheet, there are a lot more steps than last year's Polybag. So yeah, overall, I think it's much more difficult. So it's also much more satisfying to complete. And for such a tiny build, that's something that I would not have expected. We're here in the final stages, and as you can see there, I'm having some problems with the forks themselves, and you need to take note in the instructions, the piece that acts as the fork needs to go in a certain orientation when attaching to the forklift arm, or else it will not reach a full range of motion. But once we sorted out that fiasco, we have our forklift. And of course, we have our pallet too. So this is our forklift. It's very small, compact, just like the last build. But I think comparing it to the Volvo wheel loader, because there are a lot of small pieces, just visually it has a much smaller presence than the previous Polybag. The functionality overall is more or less the same with last year's Polybag. It uses the same 8-tooth gear with worm gear combination to lift up the forks up and down along the mast. While initially for me, it was a bit finicky to control. Over time, I sort of turned around, and I think it's a much more interesting and satisfying piece to play around with. And you can slide the forks under the little pallet that you get quite seamlessly and lift things up. So yeah, I think there's nothing much more to be said about this set. Despite the size, it's much more interesting to build, and it has a much more interesting function than the previous year's Polybag, and it does feature more pieces, albeit they are smaller in size. This was the 30655 forklift with pallet. Thanks for watching.